welcome to episode 2 of our Leading with Agility podcast. My name's Arif, and together with me is...
myself, TK. Hello.
Hi, everyone. And yes, a welcome from both of us here at Humble Associates to this second episode. We are excited to be back again.
Yes, we are.
With more about this whole idea of agile leadership and leading with agility, as we've talked about in our first episode. So we had a great response for the first episode. So thank you to all our listeners. And we hope you have a even more enjoyable experience listening to this one too. But I think we should start with some Happy New Year messages, TK. What do you think?
Happy New Year to everyone. Yes, Happy Year of Agility, because I think 2024 is the year that we need a lot of leadership in.
Yes.
There's elections in various countries, including our own wonderful Britain, hopefully. So let's see.
Yeah. What kind of leaders do we elect? Right. Yeah. Maybe one topic for another time, but happy New Year to all of you. We hope you have kicked off this year with new ideas, new goals in mind, new thoughts on whether, it's leadership or how you want to be as a leader, how you want to develop your leaders, whatever it is around leadership. We hope that we can support you in that endeavor through this podcast. Why not? That would be a nice aim, wouldn't it, TK?
Yes, and our New Year's resolution is to release quite a few episodes. So hopefully, bear with us. We have a plan to record and publish every week. So keep us in check for that.
Exactly. That's right. So, why don't we just do a brief recap of where we got to in our last episode? I think that'll be useful for our listeners. Some of you may have not listened to our first episode. So
shame on you. You should do it. Yeah, go ahead, download it and listen to it. It's quite fun.
Yes, we were. I guess it was more of an introduction, wasn't it, to what this podcast is all about, what we're trying to do with it, and also share some of our ideas on why we think there needs to be a refresh in what leadership needs to look like in these challenging, ever-changing, complex times that we live in, right?
Indeed. And I think, we've talked about what is agile leadership, what it entails, and we gave some cool concepts. So you might want to visit it indeed, because, we'll definitely be building upon it.
Yes, please do. And I think, what we were getting to, I think at a high level, was just the general idea that for these type of, times that we're in, as we were saying, where, most organizations are experiencing constant change and flux and disruption, we need leaders with different attributes who, possess, a way of leading that is well suited for that type of environment that you're in. Perhaps more resilient in that way, but also lead with, I think, and be inspired by agile ways of working in how they lead their teams and also how they, I suppose, evolve the organizational culture that they work in. So that was kind of at a high level the kind of things we talked about. So today, I think let's go into a bit of detail. We're going to be specifically talking about one very common, I think, still, unfortunately, behavioral attribute that leaders can find themselves in. And so we're going to talk about that, and then also hopefully explore some ideas on what you may be able to do to get out of that, I think. Is that right, TK? What are we talking about?
Well, you might recognize this from your own leaders and vicinity, or the leaders you are trying and doing your best to develop. It's micromanagement.
Yes. Micromanagement. And I think we
should have a soundboard over here.
Yeah, we should probably, kind of explain or start off by talking about why are we picking Why the big? I mean, and you listeners might be wondering, oh gosh, I know about this, and this has been around for a long time. I've experienced it in my own, work or my own employment. I've seen it before. I know it doesn't work, and I would never be that type of person, right? So why have we picked it? I think. Why have we, focused on that as a topic for today's podcast?
Well, I think because, as our listeners would probably not want to get into micromanagement, as probably many of you are L&D professionals and people that help others develop as leaders, I'm quite sure that you, in your organizations, and let's be honest, you might have people that definitely practice micromanagement or excel at it. And what we wanted to do today is talk about why it's harmful and what to do to prevent it.
Very important. Very important. Well, I think we should obviously start off with, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by micromanaging? And for those of you who attend our other, forms of gatherings, like our online webinars that we do, or follow us on LinkedIn or whatever it may be, you may. Have seen we did a webinar on this very recently.
Yes, just yesterday or the day before.
2 days ago, we did a webinar on this topic. But and we thought, well, let's just go into a bit more detail here, or maybe approach it from a different perspective as well. But in the webinar, we started off with a definition, didn't we? So, I mean, as you'd expect, it means a manager, a boss, who excessively supervises their employees. Now, I think that is going to be something quite subjective for people, what that means. There's going to be different tolerances. Some people may feel that, what excessive supervision is for one person may not be the same for someone else. There may be people in their career stages where perhaps they are less experienced in the stage of their career and appreciate, constant supervision, or need that. There may be others who obviously feel that isn't right because they are experienced enough, or they feel confident in their role. They don't require that level of supervision. I think that's one aspect. But I think also there is the other aspect of, what does supervision mean? Or what does this excessive supervision look like? It's not going to be, I'd be very surprised, someone standing there at the end of your desk looking at you and constantly asking you questions. But it could be someone who, flies around, a type of leader who, you're doing your work, you think you're getting on with things, but you just know in the back of your mind that you may get picked up, you're going to get challenged, you're going to get questioned, you may get overruled with things that you decide on. And there's this feeling of, I can't do what I want to do, or I can't do what I think I'm paid to do, because I have the skill, I have the experience. So I think that we got to put that into a bit of perspective. I don't know, what are your thoughts, TK, on what we're saying here?
Well, definitely. And it's quite interesting that this term, it's basically the micromanagement, or the excessive management is in the eyes of the beholder. That, depending on your, let's say, appetite for dealing with managers or leaders, your results may vary. And I think this is quite interesting, because the role of a great leader is to know your people and understand what is it that every one of them needs, and how you can offer your support or lack of or autonomy in a way that it can be appreciated and taken, not for granted, but in a way that's intended. It's a difficult one, and that's something we want to talk about today.
Yeah, definitely it is. So why don't we move on and maybe explore a little bit about what makes leaders, I suppose, behave in this way. Where does this come from? This need to maybe constantly be involved in the detail of the work of the team. Where do you think? Where would you suggest this kind of behavior, this need, arises from, TK?
Well, I think it comes from the biggest plague of many, if not all, leaders, and we all have that a bit. Some have it more pronounced, some don't have it at all, which is best. And this is I guess the worst problem of any leaders, which is insecurity, right? If you are an insecure leader, you will not develop trust. You will undermine people because you are undermining yourself. Things like, and I understand imposter syndrome. I understand we might feel insecure, but as a leader, people are relying on you, looking up to you to feel secure. So if you're not feeling secure yourself, this can lead to many problems, including but not limited to micromanagement. So if you are insecure, you will be insecure if you're being respected by the people that are looking up to you. If these people are, doing what they're supposed to do, because of course you're responsible. What if you fail? And all these kinds of questions, the lack of internal security, the assurance that you're doing the great thing and you've hired great people in your team is wonderful, will possibly lead you to micromanagement. Another way is there might be a habit of micromanagement that you have in your culture, in your family, in your country, in your company, but more than less, it's actually the unfortunate feeling of insecurity within a leader.
You were telling me a story of someone you met recently, I think, weren't you? Where you had that conversation, and to them it felt very natural. It was not something.
Yes, completely.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to let's tell our listeners?
Oh yeah. It's actually about. I was meeting with a doctor I know, and I was actually on holiday in Poland, and every country has a different medical culture, but she was actually, and I was like saying that, what I've observed as a leadership coach inside the medical profession, when I was like a medical client, also known as a patient, is a huge hierarchy difference. And, in terms of doctors and nurses. As a patient and as a coach, I was very keenly aware of this wonderful young person or even more experienced person staying there in the corner, saying nothing. The doctor was introducing himself or herself to me, talking about, all the medical stuff that I needed to know about or not, depending on, I only tried to go to the doctors that actually talk to me if I'm paying for it. But the nurse was just staying there during the procedure. And I was like, hello, I'm Thomas. Nice to meet you. And the nurse was like, oh, hello, I'm, and she gave me her name, Angelique, for instance, or something, right? And she was very surprised that someone is minding her at all, right? And I was like, what the hell? I was thinking, you are an active participant in caring for me.
Yes.
You have a very important role to play. So the person, the doctor I was meeting, was saying that, this is quite normal because these nurses are just simple young girls, not really educated, and you have to be really tough with them. You can't you can't even be on a first name basis. I was like, oh my god, that's shocking, right? And you have to give them written procedures and so on. I was like, look, right, that's impossible. Some of them are actually quite talented. Some of them are already experienced. And the person I was talking to said, what if in an emergency situation, like in the military, you have to be really strict and clear with them? And I said, really? I thought it could be the opposite. An experienced person can actually help you because they know how to care for a patient. They know what's dangerous for a person. And you can even, be choreographed without words. And the person gave me an example from the military, and I said, actually, I'm an avid follower of Captain Marquette. It was actually quite an interesting situation because there was like a model Titanic. And I said, how intent-based leadership works, which we might cover in one of the future episodes and so on. And I said, what they do in military, like in the US Navy, is actually the opposite of that. We trust people that they know what they're supposed to do. And if we don't have the right people, it's our job to train them or hire the right people in the first place rather than complain about the fact that they're, simple and they can't do their jobs. It's our problem as leaders that that's happening and we shouldn't have a culture. And what happened is I was with a husband of this doctor, it was a she, and then she said, no, we only need them to do the things. And I said, you're actually looking for bio robots, the biobots, and the husband laughed at that, and the conversation ended.
Yeah.
But it would be a shame if we reduced people to biobots.
Yeah.
I know we'll soon have AI doing a lot of the work, and maybe let's not get into the respect to the AI, but I'm hoping that we'll also treat it with respect that it's worth. But I'm maybe straying away from the topic.
No. That's But that's fine. And I think interesting conversation that you had there, right? In totally. For that person, inconsequential behavior. It's like, this is normal. I'm happy to. I don't need them to think. I need them to do, and that's the most important thing. Right. So, I mean, we'll come to some of what you were saying a bit later, I think, and let's not forget. But I mean, let's just pause on that and think a bit about how does this impact employees, right? And I think for the leaders listening, and maybe even those who are working in that field of developing, supporting, growing leaders, this is probably something you have some thoughts on yourselves. I'm sure.
Also in medicine, right? Yeah. Because the doctor is a leader, as we've just
exactly,
described.
Which is that from a employee perspective, right? Does it really encourage employees, or does it, I suppose, help employees increase their confidence, trust in this type of leader? That's a question. I think we're going to come to it, but we've been, some of the stuff I've been reading suggests the opposite. Obviously, there's stuff already, surveys, data around there of employees feeling untrusted and feeling like they're not valued and not really rating the qualities of that leadership style if they see that a lot. So that there's
no doubt.
So that's something that and I think one other observation I've had from my experiences is that leaders who practice this type of behavior themselves lack empathy at times with the people that they have employed. And in the same case that you've described of that doctor, I think we can say to some extent that may be true for her, where she has unfortunately not considered the feelings, the thoughts, or the needs of her staff, but it's more a case of the result. And so as long as the result is achieved, I'm not really worrying too much about my staff. I just need that result to be achieved. Now,
absolutely. In what she was saying, she minded the staff not at all. And I think it was very surprising because, it's like we need nurses, but, if we could remove them, we would be glad to do so because they're more of a nuisance than any help.
No, exactly.
Oh, geez, man, it was so difficult to listen to.
No, exactly. And I think, so I was just going to end on this point, really, which was just to say that, if we have leaders like that, who have this kind of perspective, obviously that means that they themselves don't necessarily value the expertise and the skill that they have in their teams. So that I think that, and if you are, for our listeners out there, I think that might be a difficult thing to hear, but something to think about. Definitely something to think about.
And, if I may add, it's a very interesting example of, and I was thinking all the time, and it wasn't a conversation when I was asked to help, but many a time I've met leaders like that, and I was thinking, okay, what if I wanted to help this doctor to change her mind a bit? What if I want to expose her to a different way of thinking? And this is why I've talked about Captain Maquette and intent-based leadership, and I talked about how the ship would turn and so on. So this might help, right?
This might help. So let's
need more time.
Let's talk a little bit about that now. So I think the opposite of this, right? So we talk about micromanagement, but what does an environment where micromanagement doesn't exist look like? And I think we can safely say that would be something different, where there would be, or there are, I suppose, greater conditions for trust, autonomy, and leaders feeling more comfortable letting go, and they're feeling more comfortable in the decisions staff make, and that maybe they, as you've described, that approach where they ask more questions and they ask for clarification, and they trust their staff a bit more. That would be the opposite, right? But why is that? I think let's start with why is that important? Why do we need, or why do we, TK and Arif, advocate for that type of approach? And I think for us, or for me, it comes back to what we talked about at the start of this podcast and introducing this whole thing of agile leadership, which is, when we're working in like that medical scenario, an environment where there's constant change, there's volatility, things can happen. It requires multi-skilled and highly skilled, highly competent people to come around to solve a problem. Then you need those people to feel confident, comfortable, and secure in being able to solve a problem without the interference they think they might, that might hinder them. So from an agile leadership point of view, I would say, and TK, what let's hear what you think. But I would say this is critical. This is a really key behavioral attribute that you need to cultivate in your leadership style.
I would even go further.
Go for
because, there's my favorite question. Why? Why do you need to do that, right? It's so hard. I can just tell my nurses what to do. This is what I've always done. TK and Arif, humble associates, think, why am I supposed to? And I will say this. We can no longer afford to waste people's potential.
Yeah.
You're hiring people, you're paying them. Soon you will have a choice to hire a robot. Maybe you'll pay them less. So if you hire the person, that means you have to pay the person. That person, you're wasting them. And it's like, it's like with muscles or with stamina or with, intelligence too. If you're not using things, they atrophy.
Yeah.
So if you have people, especially when they're, permanent employees of yours, you are degrading them. You are not able to get, I'm not saying maximum value because this sounds like Frederick Taylor. You are not able to get your value from these wonderful people. They are being wasted. Wasting is not a great, if you can afford it, fine. If you're doing so well that you don't need any help, you probably want to listen to a different podcast where to go on vacation. But if you yourself find that you want to improve your circumstances of yourself and your business, the first thing is not to waste human potential. People are not resources. But they're your talent. And, hiring great people and telling them what to do, as Steve Jobs said, that's just stupid.
Yeah. But I think also nowadays we're in a situation where the way the market is working and the dynamics of it are that I think there's more power in employees have than they ever did in deciding where they want to go, who they want to work for. So that's something else to as a dynamic to consider. But beyond that, one thing I wanted to just bring in as a supporting argument or supporting point. I was reading this HBR article recently around. It's titled "How to Help Without Micromanaging." Very helpful title, and one key thing that they mention there, and we'll maybe come to some of the other stuff that their research has uncovered. They've done a lot of research on this whole issue, which is quite fascinating. Is that they recognize what I was talking about earlier around this type of complex work, where it requires a lot of problem solving, multifunctional teams and people highly skilled working together, collaborating together to kind of solve problems. In that type of environment, team members require not just superficial advice or encouragement, they say, but they need assistance that is both well-timed and appropriate to their issues. I thought that's a very nice encapsulating way of describing. So it's not a case of, regular checking in for the sake of checking in, regularly questioning for the sake of questioning, or overriding for the sake of it because you think you know best, or it's not that type of behavior, which I would argue it comes under micromanagement, but it's more about providing help, providing assistance, and doing that at the right time when it's needed. I think that's a nice way of looking at it.
It is, but as everything, this is quite a general consultant way of saying things.
Go on.
When needed, and it depends. No, I fully agree. But wait, there's more, right? We're here.
Yeah.
We are the consultants that actually explain things to you, and we don't say it depends, because I would liken it to the modern invitation for a hug.
Yes.
Okay, so that's another TKism. It's like, okay, well, some people prefer to maybe stay away a bit from physical contact, and yet many people prefer to hug. I don't mind myself, but I don't want to be awkward. So I usually say, okay, I see that there's an outburst of emotion. I am happy to offer a hug. And it's like a true invitation that I'm given. I'm likening this support and help to that, right?
Yeah.
That, yes, first of all, if some of you are, maybe acquainted with the situational leadership tool by Ken Blanchard, one would say that in some situations when an employee is less experienced, you need more support, and when when the employee is more experienced, less. But also it depends on the individual. I'm not denying situational leadership too, but I will say it's quite individualized too. So how do you know? And you have to put an invitation in. But on the other hand, one other person would say, well, is this invitation truthful? Is this, have you really created a safe space for this invitation to be taken as a real invitation, not just something you say, right? How do you make people take you up on that? And I've actually been thinking about that, Arif, quite a bit. And I have a good example for you. So here's the TK litmus test of wisdom, or a nugget of wisdom. As a manager, even if you say to me that you've always been saying, okay, yeah, come to me whenever you need help. In here, we always do that. Are you doing the same with your boss? Are you going for help to your boss too? Are you walking the path you preach? Because if people see that you are being congruent with your invitation because you're doing it too, and other people are doing it, especially yourself, people will take it for what you mean it to be.
Good way of thinking about it. Thank you, Tika. That's a nice, profound thing to consider. I think beyond, just touching on that or associated to that, let's talk about the responsibility of a leader. Yeah, in creating these conditions that we've described. How would we? What would we say to our listeners out there in terms of their responsibility? How they should take that on. What would you say?
Well, it's one of our first episodes of the podcast. So we might not be used to the TK's rules of leadership. But the first responsibility of a leader in TK's book is creating a culture of the organization, right? The leader models the culture of the organization. So, because it's the main role of leadership, and of course there's other things to do, if they want to, it's their sole responsibility, essentially. It's not that it was the role of the leader. This is their role. They need to create the culture. And if they want to create a culture of aggression, demeaning, and all these kinds of things I talked about with the medical profession, that's your choice. Yeah. It's your organization if it is so, right? Or you're a part of leaders in this organization. I'm not telling you what to do. It's the market that verifies you and what you do. However, if you yourself want to become an agile leader that really can utilize and be the best leader you can be, have the best culture you can, stay tuned and listen to what we would like to say, because it's your responsibility to create the culture. And for you, the L&D person that's responsible for developing your leaders, it's you that has to create the conditions for your leaders to develop. So you have to create the conditions for your leaders to subscribe to this podcast.
Nice plug. Great stuff. Thank you. So let's kind of, as we head to a latter stage of our episode today, I think it's only fair we start thinking about practical stuff. The
autumn of the episode.
Yeah. Let's talk about some practical stuff, right? Let's help our listeners out there with some ideas on what they can actually do, right? So let's start with that. I think one of the things that we can talk about here is self-reflection. I think that's a really important way of for all of you, for any leader out there, really. If you're listening to this and if you're considering your own leadership style, and maybe we're provoking you, I hope not too harshly, but we're provoking.
My title on LinkedIn, thought provoking.
Yeah, exactly. We're provoking you. It maybe hopefully not too harshly, but thinking about, yes, I may not be that type of leader who's sitting on the end of the desk like I was talking about and, checking in every 2 minutes, but I do have a tendency to want to, oversee things a bit too much, perhaps, and want to get into the detail a bit too much, and maybe I'm not good at standing back when I can stand back. So if you are that type of person, or you're thinking about it's making you think that, then I think start with some self-reflection, and ask yourself some questions around, what, like you said at the start, TK, what is it that I'm most fearful about, right? What am I most fearful about that could, that makes me want to be involved in all the detail of what's going on in however shape or form. Yeah, that could be as a starting point. There's maybe something that you've not asked yourself, that you've not thought about. That's something I was thinking. I don't know if you have another suggestion, TK, as part of that.
Yes, I do.
Go for it. Yeah.
So this is a TK's suggestion from TK's chest of experience. Send your employees home. Let them work from anywhere. I know, controversial, and if possible, obviously, company policy and the job they're doing. But why am I saying so? Because this will help you reflect and see the itch you have to check up on them, right? Because you can't see them, so it will make that even more visible. It will make them happy because a lot of employees would like to have the option for flexibility, and it will also show that you have the trust that they can do the job that they're hired to do, and you're happy to give them the autonomy. I'm saying this is from TK's chest because when I started my leadership journey, when I was quite young, I was working in the office, but most of my team, if not all of my team, was actually remote to me in a different office. And I said, look, right, to be honest, it's my first time as a team leader. I'm probably doing some stupid things, and you're probably sitting in this room laughing at me. And that's okay. I'm accepting that. I'm here, right? If I'm doing something wrong, tell me. I'm sure you're gossiping at me, and that's fine. I trust that this is, how it's supposed to be. And if I'm doing something stupid, you have my permission to laugh at me. And I think this experience of working remotely, even if in the olden days from an office, has taught me a lot in terms of trusting people. And yes, I had a bout of micromanagement too, and I got some feedback. And, it was like, I remember when I was spamming people from different channels, I texted them, messaged them at the same time, trying to get them. But this is how I learned. This is how I learned by having, I'm not saying a crutch, but training weights, right? The communication was theoretically a bit more difficult, but the autonomy was there, and I was forced to trust more.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for that one. It's a good one. Yeah, good way to think about it. So once you've I think started that process, of doing some reflection, hopefully started to think about your own style, what you could do differently for yourself, how you want to be, as you were talking about earlier as well, TK. Let's go back to what we but one of the references I shared earlier, which is this HBR research that I've been reading. And so just as a bit of context, this is 10 years of studying leaders and how leaders effectively offer help without being perceived as micromanagers. So this is, quite a large body of research they've been doing. And through all of that, they, I think, have basically suggested 3 key strategies for you out there, right? So what are they? Number 1, time your help so it comes when people are ready for it. So let's start with that one. So what does that mean, right? So they say that we've found in their research that When advice was given in the course of Teams' work, after problems had emerged, rather than beforehand, team members understood and valued it more. That's interesting. I think that's quite a revealing, find as part of their research, and I suppose, I'm sure if we think about it, we can relate to that, So, you've got a leader who comes in and says, I need you to do it like this, and I think you should be doing this, and blah, blah, blah. People, I think most team members people in teams might react differently. Some might get offended, some might get upset and think, well, all this work I've been doing has gone to waste, and he hasn't considered the effort that we've put in, and it's or whatever, right? And so what the HBR research is suggesting is, well, if you do this, afterwards. If you give your advice afterwards, then it can be understood a bit better and valued more. What do you think, TK, on this one?
Well, I would say that it's also something that has plagued me personally. I think it's interesting because obviously prevention is much easier than fixing things. But you're right. As a leader, you have to be quite conscious of the impact of your words that are associated with your authority.
Yeah.
And, if you're, for instance, critical of an idea, even if you yourself think that you're just criticizing an idea, a person may associate their self-worth with that idea because you're the boss. Yeah. It just has a different meaning, even though you had no ill will in saying what you're saying, right? So if you said it afterwards, that's definitely easier for some people.
Definitely. And I think when I was reading some of the insights they were sharing, and they gave some stories of some of these leaders or examples of some of the leaders they spoke to, and that came out, that exact point came out, which was, and you mentioned it earlier on, one lady describing how she recognized that, look, I employed these guys, or they brought this team together, they're highly skilled, they know what they're doing. So, when I talk to them or offer them my thoughts, I'm conscious of when I do that, because they need to feel valued, that their opinions matter. So if I go into a room in a meeting with them, I'll make sure first I listen to what they're talking about before I decide on what to say and what advice to offer. So that's someone who's clearly thinking and actively worrying about how they are perceived and the intervention approach they take.
This is quite true, but we should be mindful about one more thing, which is being congruent. So if, for instance, you were to see me changing my approach 180, or any leader, it's essentially playing a game, right? So I'm quite direct myself. As a thought provoker, as a truth teller, it would be strange for me to play a game and, pretend I like the idea I don't. Obviously, I can deliver my constructive criticism in a different way. But please, as a leader, be congruent, because everyone can sense when you're acting strangely. It doesn't help. Yeah. It just demeans everything you do.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. And but if you're doing it, with transparency and openness, and I think, your intentions are in the right place. We are hoping that you are, those of you listening, you got your right intentions. You got the right ideas in mind in terms of why you're behaving the way you're doing. You got the right intention in mind. It's perhaps it's the execution of it is what we're talking about here today, right? So, but take the point. You're right. So let's move on. So the second strategy that the research identified or has identified is this point, and maybe it relates to what you've just said, I think, which is to be open and clear to your team that you're there to help them. So maybe that would take that edge off that some of that conversation or that assumption. Why is he saying this? Why is he telling me this? Why is he offering is there some ulterior motive?
He wants to hug me.
Yeah, exactly. But just be open with your team. Say, look, I'm here to help. I'm here to assist you. I want to get the best outcome for all of us as a team, etc., etc. And that's why maybe I'm behaving in this way, or this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So just be open about that. And so what did they find about that? They said, well, they found, as part of the research, that leaders rated as particularly helpful. So in terms of maybe internal staff surveys that L&D teams might run or HR teams might run, where they're surveying the quality of leadership. If that happens in most organizations, right? So leaders that were rated as being particularly helpful were ones who took pains to persuade those under them that they were stepping in only for one reason, which is to support their employees' work or their staff members' work, right? So they really made an effort, a conscious effort to, tell their team, look, I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. I'm not here to take over. I'm not here to change anything. I'm just here to help. And so that apparently, from the research, was a consistent kind of, I suppose, finding in terms of which type of leadership which type of leaders are rated a bit higher in terms of when it comes to how they interact with their staff, in terms of how they provide their support and help.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes perfect sense that it would be that. Again, congruence is key. But I think, the important thing with this, and what we see often, and maybe our listeners can relate to, is that there are too many times where when there's this incongruence, maybe let's say it like that, TK, leaders have, I think it's harsh to say ulterior motives, but perhaps they have to bear in mind or keep in mind other priorities, or perhaps that, I'm accountable for this, or my leadership or the higher level leadership are really, focused on making sure X happens. And so therefore that's the only thing that's important. And I may, have to step in and override things, or I may have to direct the team in a certain way because we need to get to a particular place. But they don't. Yes, you're a white savior coming in, and you're being micromanaged by your senior leaders. And
the frustrating thing, and I've been on the receiving end of this, is that you never get really told why. You don't actually get a clear understanding as to, okay, but what is it, that information that my leader has or my boss has that they're not sharing with me? Why are they behaving in this way? Or why are they telling me I need to focus on this when I think here, me, on the ground, seeing what's going on, I know we need to do X instead of Y. What are they hiding from me? So I think this is...
I don't know if I can do a good Jack Nicholson impression by saying, you can't handle the truth.
Oh, yeah, that famous scene from the
Few Good Men, Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah. With the Tom Cruise film, wasn't it? When Tom Cruise is interviewing, Is he? Anyway, it doesn't matter. He's on the stand.
Yeah,
he's on the stand.
He's on the stand. He's on the stand. But essentially, right? This is the same thing, and I managed to peak my microphone, which is a good thing. But what I wanted to say is, why are you having? If people in your team are not able to comprehend the complexities that you're dealing with, it's your responsibility to train them and hire the right people in the first place. It's your fault, Mr. Madam Leader. No one else's. Yeah. Don't blame anyone. You have to pick your people up, help them, and elevate them to a level they understand what you're dealing with.
Yeah. So, and then the third strategy they talk about, based on their research, is all about aligning the rhythm of your involvement. I like this rhythm. I like that word. So it basically is what they're arguing, what they're describing in their research is that when you step in, provide your help and support, align it for when it's needed. So increase the intensity of that support and the frequency of it based on when it's needed. So, for example, there was a case that they document in their research where a leader not around for a few days and a team had progressed with a project, and they were working on it, and they started making some decisions, but they were getting stuck a bit, and they weren't sure what to do next. This was, I think, they were moving from an idea to a pilot. The leader returned after a few days, and the way she described it was, I realized that obviously they needed my help, but I had to be very careful as to how I provided that. So we got into a room, and the first thing I did was listen to everyone explaining where they got to, what happened, what the challenges were, and I ensured that I limited myself to just one or two questions, but those really were focused or clear questions to help direct them into where they need to go next. And what she was describing was that, as one of the other examples was that when managers clarify the intentions, employees were more candid about the problems they faced and were more willing to accept help and work collaboratively to solve them. So I think really important thing here is, be clear of why you're doing what you're doing, time it and do it in the right way, and have a cadence of when you're providing that support that matches the needs of the team. So if the need of the team is that, okay, they every so often are publishing something or releasing something or creating an output of whatever that thing is that they're doing, nearer that time they may need a bit more support and guidance. That's when you want to increase your intensity of your work, perhaps, of your involvement or the frequency of it, and maybe not at other times. Just match it to your team's natural rhythm of work.
Indeed. It's interesting. Yeah, it's, for instance, those that work in the agile ways, especially Scrum, have some natural moments where to help.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this is for anyone. So we're not obviously talking about, It doesn't have to be agile ways of working that your team is following. It's whatever the natural pattern and rhythm of work.
Whatever the rhythm is, right?
So I think we'll put the link to this article in the episode description, so you'll be able to access it and read it for yourself in your own time. Please do that. So those are the three strategies that their research has uncovered. HBI have uncovered. I thought it was a really nice way of providing some practical tools and support for our leaders out there. TK, I don't know, did you want to close on anything there, or suggest anything else, or add some more thoughts on what we've been discussing?
I would just say walk the talk and be congruent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you want people to appreciate your help, appreciate help yourself. If you want to be treated seriously or be appreciated for what you say, be congruent with who you are.
Yeah, definitely be congruent.
And be a better person, by the way.
Well, I think that's for all of us.
Should, right?
That's for all of us. We all want to be better people. That's why I hope you're listening to this. You're looking for improvements. You're looking for ways to be better, right? So, but there we are. So those are I hope some nice things to consider, some tools, some techniques that you may want to consider for your leadership style. But yeah, wow. So much we've covered today. I hope you've enjoyed listening to everything we've been discussing. But I think we should do a quick summary, and then we'll close off today's episode. And we've talked a lot. So where did we start? I mean, we talked about micromanagement and where it comes from and why people do it, I think, and how it's perceived, perhaps, and what causes it to happen, didn't we, TK? That's where we started from. Where did we go next? What else have we been talking about today as a kind of...
Well, we've talked about examples of micromanagement. We talked about how controversial it can be.
Yes.
And we talked about how the strategies you can use, but also the pitfalls you can have with them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, as we were just saying there, TK, about being congruent and trying to be the best you can be, I think I'd like to call out what we talked about a bit earlier around that self-reflection and doing some of that work on yourself. I think that was an important thing that I wanted to share anyway to you guys, to all of you listeners out there. So I hope you can and take that on board in some way. And then, some really cool insights from some, a decade's worth of research from the Harvard Business Review on this topic, which I wouldn't be one to dismiss. I think it has merit. Definitely something we can learn from. And there are other things around this topic we've not touched on. There's so much we can talk about. Maybe we'll come back to it in another episode. We probably will. But for now, for today, I just wanted to say thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to us. We hope you've had a great experience listening to our ramble on this topic. TK, any last words from you?
Yes, well, make sure to be there for the next one because we're going to publish the next one soon, and hopefully we'll ramble as much or even less.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Bye-bye.